2022 was an amazing year for music, and I hope 2023 will give us just as many amazing albums as last year did. This is my top 25 albums of 2022, expanding across all types of genres. The first 15 albums I mentioned will not be in any particular order, but the last 10 will be, and they really struck a chord with me this year. I kept on coming back to them. They were in heavy rotation. The first one I have to talk about is In Case I Make It by Will Wood. It's a singer-songwriter folk pop record that is very relaxing, calming, a lot of ballads on here. Some of the lyrics can come off a little bit corny, but I think it's a really good album and you should definitely check it out. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10, and I've just sat in bed listening to it, reading the lyrics, and just appreciating the sounds that goes on. It's exceedingly simple, but you know, sometimes less is more. All right, number 24 is Diaspora Problems by Soul Glow. Hardcore punk noise rock album that just hits you in the face with every listen. The standout track for me is Driponomics with Mother Mary Rose. The first time I heard this, it just blew me away. Every song on here is really good. It's not totally my genre, but it's probably my favorite thing from it to come out this year. Some of it is a little bit more hip hop oriented. The lead vocals are very strong and impressive, and I just don't know an album like this. Definitely check it out. Number 23 is actually a close friend of mine, Cyan Heaven's There's Not a Better Life. He also released an album earlier last year called Blocked Out of Hell, but I think There's Not a Better Life with more listens is a better album. Soul Glow, I'm gonna give a 7 out of 10, but There's Not a Better Life, I'm gonna give an 8 out of 10. There are elements of alternative pop and R&B and hip hop on here. I think it makes for a really soothing listen. The first half of the track list has these almost, Because the Internet by Childish Gambino inspired, numbered 1, 2, and 3 in between actual songs. So it goes song, instrumental, song, instrumental, song, instrumental. I think it's a really cool idea, and it transitions between each genre flawlessly. There's also my personal favorite song, Apocalyptico. Jesus Christ, if I pronounced that wrong, I'm sorry. Really good reggaeton song. It just really blew me away because from him being from Colombia, really tapped into his roots there, and I just love it. The next album I want to talk about, number 22, is Brent Faiyaz's Wasteland. Brent Faiyaz has slowly become one of my favorite R&B artists. I love his soothing vocals, and the people he usually works with, though few, are really talented, and Wasteland is no exception. I don't think it's as good as 2020's Fuck the World, but with features from Tyler, the Creator, Drake, and the Neptunes, I think he kills it with elements of alternative R&B and neo-soul. He also has this really thematic progressive skits, and the last one is almost haunting. It creates this really good story that I think works well with the album. I think it could have been executed more. I do like the ideas that were given there. So that's all I have to say about that. Moving on to number 21 is Renaissance by Beyoncé, a dance house pop record that will just make you smile, have fun with it, put it on in the car, drive to it, put it on in the club, put it on with some friends. It's a fucking incredible album. And I know it blew away many people. I think it's probably my favorite Beyoncé album. Lemonade is really good too. Renaissance just has so much to offer, and the guest features on it, I believe there's a Beam feature. I don't know. It's just a really good album that you don't even have to look at the track list. You don't even have to look at the lyrics. You just feel the energy. You feel the confidence. It's a confident ass album, and I love it, and it makes me feel confident too. So number 20 is a recent album, SZA's SOS. This amazing R&B, hip hop, and sometimes even rock influenced album is incredible. And some people say it's bloated. Some people don't like the experimentation, especially with the rock side of things, but I think it's a great album and will maybe grow to be my favorite from SZA. Control from 2017 was great. I loved that. But I think this just has some really good songs on it, and I've enjoyed listening to almost every single one. I think there's either 22 or 24 songs, and while that may seem like a lot, I don't know, I think it works, and it's a really fun listen. So number 19 is an artist I actually only got into this year, but his favorite album that I've heard from him dropped. Alex G's God Save the Animals. This is an indie folk neo psychedelia album, that I was put onto from my friends at the new art school that I go to. And there's been some discourse because the effects he put on his vocals are almost kind of like Drain Gangy, but there's still some classic Alex G acoustic cuts on here. And I think it's probably his most creative album to date. With older albums like Race, I don't think there was as much variation. I think he's extremely talented, and while I did not get to see him live this year, my friends did, and they said it was an incredible experience. I saw some videos, and I think it elevated my thoughts on this album even more. While I don't come back to it as much as some of the other albums previously mentioned, every single time I do, he doesn't miss with me, and I really appreciate that. Number 18. Flood by Stella Donnelly. Or it's Stella Donnelly, I don't know. I really don't know much about this artist. I was just put onto it by a friend one day when it dropped. It is an amazing indie pop singer-songwriter album. Her vocals are incredible. That's the main part of this album that I like. I think the production is really well done as well. I think it's mixed really good. Her vocals are stunning. I would love to hear some live performances. I might go check some out after this video. I really haven't done a whole lot of research in this artist. It's an artist that I was just brought into recently. I think that you should go check it out, and I'm definitely gonna do my research. Flood, Stella Donnelly. Number 17, I hope I'm not losing count, Kenny Mason's RUFFS. Kenny Mason has been one of my favorite artists for the last couple of years, ever since I heard Hit, ever since I've heard the collabs that he's done with JID, Denzel Curry, Freddie Gibbs, all of the above. And now he's worked with some fantastic legends like J. Cole and Lil Wayne, so he's very much appreciated in the hip-hop community. Even though he has an alternative twang to him, I think that just sets him apart from the rest and makes him extremely creative. RUFFS isn't bad at all, it's actually great. Especially the song, which is one of my favorite songs of the year, Nosedive with Gene Dawson. Hearing that on my car speakers, driving to school for the first time, doing my first RUFFS album listen, was just insane, and it hyped me up so much, and it made me super happy for the rest of the album. The producer Coop, that was on like 8 of the songs, I don't think he needs to work with him any more than he did on RUFFS. He has a really cool sound. I think it's just a little basic for Kenny Mason. I think it works with another artist he works with a lot, Young Nudie. But that being said, RUFFS is still a great album. It's really fun, and the variation of genres, while a lot of it is trap and hip-hop based, it's executed really well. Next is another friend of mine's album, Iggy Madison's Speaking to an Empty Room. Speaking to an Empty Room is the most recent album she's dropped, and I think it's her best to date. The experimentation on here is incredible. I don't even know what to classify genre-wise some of the songs on here. It's nothing that I've ever heard before. It's also not totally my thing. The songs that I get into. And the creativity and the guests that have been brought onto this match so well with Iggy's style. She consistently puts out great music. She puts out at least one song a week. So there's always something new in the Iggy Madison catalog for you to check out. But definitely start with this album. All right, the next one is Gene Dawson's Chaos Now, with elements of indie rock and alt pop. It's a lot more poppy than his last album. I don't think it's as good as Pixel Bath. It definitely grew off me from the first time I listened. I think it would have been in my top 10 if I just went off that first listen. I do really like what he's done here, and I think he just has continued to grow and experiment with more genres, and I really respect that. I'm really excited for what he has to come, maybe this year or next year. I don't really have a whole lot of problems with it. All of these albums that I've mentioned would get an 8 out of 10. But this is the one that I felt maybe I was the most disappointed on, even though I really liked it. The next album is Ren Cinema's Rem Semina, A Dream I Forgot About 8 minutes ago. Very short, clean, hip-hop, rap, alternative album, about 10 songs, and it is great. He reminds me a lot of early Childish Gambino. I don't know if he's influenced by that a lot. That's just what it reminds me of, and I really like that era of Gambino. I think Ren really benefits from having that inspiration. None of it seems derivative. All of it seems original, and I think he has a really fun and unique sound, and I think him, among the many artists I know from Philadelphia, are incredible, and I think you should definitely go check out that scene. The next one is Denzel Curry's Melt My Eyes, See Your Future, a southern hip-hop, neo-soul, jazz, rap influenced, all of the above. It is Denzel's best album to date. I used to be a big Denzel dick rider in like 2019, 2020. I've since grown off of him heavily, but this album made me come back because I think it is his best. There are some crazy guest features like T-Pain, Robert Glasper, Rico Nasty, JID, all of the above. 454, put me on to 454. I like him a lot. JPEG Mafia produced one of the songs. There's just a lot of really good art being put on here, and I think the world he built with this album is great. And my favorite song is probably Zatoichi with Slow Tie, especially how the chorus makes me think heavily of like a fighting scene of some martial arts, and the music video definitely elevated that scene in my mind, but it paints such a vivid and intense picture, and that's definitely one of my favorite songs of the year. I would say give this album a listen if you like any of Denzel's earlier work, because I think it's his most polished. The next one I have is Silk Money's I Don't Give a Fuck About This Rap Shit, I'ma Just Drop Until I Don't Feel Like It Anymore. Abstract hip-hop, jazz rap, very intense. His best album to date with Khalil Blue production all across the entire record. I love Khalil Blue, I love Silk Money, I love that entire scene. And I think that they're such a powerhouse duo that every single time they drop music together, it just elevates more and more the more times they work with each other. I think they should continue to work with each other and never stop. His lyrical content has always been amazing. I think he's probably one of my favorite lyricists ever, because he's just so passionate about what he's talking about. He is extremely comedic and he's extremely well written and smart. So I would say pull up a Genius page and listen to this album. The artist that does the visuals for all of the album covers that Silk has done, my God, beautiful. Some of my favorite album cover artwork I've ever seen. And the last honorable mention I have is a bit of a controversial one. It's Drake's Honestly Nevermind. Drake dropped two pretty good albums this year. The other one is Her Loss with 21 Savage, but I think Her Loss was a little bloated. I think 21 didn't get as much shine as he deserved. But Honestly Nevermind is just like the perfect match of Drake at its finest. It's one of my favorite Drake albums I've ever heard. It's so fun, it's so diverse, it's so different from anything he's ever done. I get how people don't like this album, and while there are some really good hip-hop cuts on here as well, like Jimmy Cooks with 21 Savage, I think that the direction he went with of rap is really well, and I like Drake's singing. I know it's heavily affected. I know he probably can't actually sing that well, but there's nothing wrong with using effects on your voice, and I think the production is really well. I think the mixing is really good. It's just a fun album, so don't listen to the haters. Give this one a listen if you haven't. With that said, here are my top 10 albums of 2022. Number 10, I actually have this on vinyl, Rosalia's Motomami. Experimental pop, all reggaeton, many different genres on here, and it's just incredible. I've never heard a Latin record that I've connected with more. Hearing an album that is not even in a language that I listen to make my top 10 is mind-blowing, because that's how good the sounds are. That's how good the vocals are. That's how good the production is. And the experimentation on here, it's probably one of the most experimental albums I've heard this year, which is so weird because it's from an artist as popular as Rosalia. And there were some other popular artists that did some crazy amounts of experimentation, like Gene Dawson, Drake, Beyoncé, but I don't think there's a single artist in the mainstream right now that executed as flawlessly as Rosalia. Number 9, there's a YouTube animator that did like storytime animators I used to watch growing up, Tony V Tunes. I always knew he made music and I listened to it, I'm like, yeah, this is fun. I didn't know he would have an album that would make my album of the year list. And number 9 is 222 by Tony22. Bedroom pop, pop rap. Hell, there's even some cuts on here that have screaming at the end of it. I did not expect screaming from a bedroom pop artist. I think there's 15 songs on here. While most of them were released as singles in 2021, I didn't really listen to them. And I think that paid off, because this album came out in the beginning of last year and it has stuck with me ever since. I remember driving in my old Malibu listening to this whenever it was super icy outside, and I wasn't in the best place physically, like actually I wasn't in the best place. I was in a hotel room, but I just wasn't in the best place mentally as well, and I was dealing with some relationship struggles, and I think this album really helped me a lot. So thank you, Tony. I appreciate it a lot. You brought me a lot of wonder and joy as a kid watching your animations, and I'm glad I've grown up with you, because I can tell you've matured, you've elevated with this music shit. The animation and the art is still very much apparent in your covers. Even if it's edited pictures of yourself, just like 222, you can see the design factor and the creativity is still there, and I'm glad you were able to keep that alive. And my number 8 spot also has an incredibly done album cover, as well as 8 songs with a hip hop, R&B, and pop vibe, with some acoustic ballads that will make you smile. It is Marika Sage's HITJEX. I found Marika Sage in the beginning of the year. I'm not sure how. They're a very humble person. I've messaged them on Instagram a lot, and this album has stuck in very, very heavy rotation ever since. I remember going to some sort of choir event in like March or April, and I found this and I listened to it and I fell in love immediately. My favorite song on it is probably Forbidden Juices. It's just, her vocals are so beautiful. And I know I've said that a lot, but seriously, if there is one person on this list that I think's vocals really just captivate you, it's Marika Sage. Number 7 is actually a friend of mine, Valerie, with Project I Feel You. Some pop elements in here, some R&B elements in here, some hip hop elements in here. 11 songs that are just great. Some of the songs came out as singles, some of the songs are just voice notes from friends. I think it comes together to make this story about Ronaldo the Clown amazing. My favorite song is Mr. Snow, but there's also some cuts with Cesar Zave and Beige, such as Time With You, such as Can More. The incredible instrumental ending epilogue that I actually got to hear live in an auditorium speaker, and that was a fucking trip. Definitely go check out Project I Feel You. Number 6 is another friend of mine, Banshee and JS Punch's Southern hip hop, cloud rap, trap inspired It Takes One to Drown. It's only 7 songs, but you can make such an amazing album in just 7 songs. You know, you can work with a lot with just 7 songs, and It Takes One to Drown by Banshee and JS Punch is nothing short of that. JS Punch, producer, vocalist, Banshee, just the vocalist, both amazing chemistry, dynamic ass duo. It won't be everyone's cup of tea. I know some of the vocal deliveries are flawed, but I think I like those flaws. I don't know. I can recognize that it isn't perfect. You know, you could nitpick about any sort of media on any occasion. And so I just sit back and I appreciate the music. All of these 7 songs I really connect with. I love it. And it also has one of my other favorite artists that has my number 2 spot featured on one of the songs, which I will not reveal, but please go check out It Takes One to Drown. My number 5 spot is Metro Boomin's Heroes and Villains, Southern hip hop trap influence with some R&B cuts from The Weeknd. There is a powerhouse of artists in here that is pretty similar to his last album, but I think this blows that out of the water. Heroes and Villains is such a badass album. It makes you feel like a hero in some songs. It makes you feel like a villain in some songs. This world that Metro Boomin and Morgan Freeman have created is just, it feels cinematic. Even though it was an end of the year record, it really made it feel like this year was worth it for music. Go listen to it. There's Don Toliver, there's Gunna, there's Future, there's Travis Scott, there's 21 Savage, there's The Weeknd, there's Mustafa. There's all these amazing artists that some I don't even really like on their own. They shine because Metro Boomin has just curated these amazing instrumentals so well and have put what he thinks is the best match for the artist. Number 4, very, very popular album. Some people's number 1s. It's Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Conscious hip hop, contemporary R&B, some pop cuts. What hasn't been said about this album already? If you haven't listened to it, what are you doing? This is the most, I think, impressive to me album. I think this is definitely his most controversial album to date. I think you could probably make a whole video essay about what Kendrick Lamar did wrong on this album, but he did so much right. This is so different from anything I'd ever expect him to do, and it deserves the number 4 spot, and it deserves your ears to listen. Number 3 is also a very controversial pick because I've had people listen to this album and say it's some of the worst music they've heard. They just couldn't get into it. This is the album that's given me probably the most insane energy, insane hype. It's made me feel good when I feel bad. It's made me feel bad when I feel good. In the best way. I'm talking about Afourteen's Black Flamingo. Industrial, trap metal, noisy. God, this is probably my favorite, like, just loud album I've ever heard. Because there's so many different genres of, like, loud ass music, but I think this is the best, in my opinion. There's only 7 songs on here. It's crazy how many short albums made it to the top of the list, but it's because they pack so much amazingness in just one song. And it like explodes. It's overwhelming. Everything from Heroes and Villains down, I'd give a 9 out of 10, but this and Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers deserve a 10 out of 10. Number 2, Chandler Owens' My Unpredictable Thoughts Under the Moonlight. pop rap singer-songwriter record with some hip hop and trap cuts. I found this guy through Banshee. I don't know why he connects with me so much. It's another one of those things where it's like I look at it and I understand why people don't like this at all. I don't know why I love it. I think it's just because it's so raw emotionally. I think it's just so true to what I experience as a human being. The topics that they touch upon are romantic interest and love and feeling alone and being imperfect and dealing with signs of mental illness. And I think that that's a topic that a lot of us that have dealt with in the past that can relate to. And there are many albums, many songs, many artists that have conveyed those feelings into music. But for me, Chandler Owens does that the best and makes me feel human listening to him. I'm glad I can call him my friend. I'm glad I've made music with them, and I want to continue doing that. And my number one spot is Quadeca's I Didn't Mean to Haunt You. Art pop, experimental hip hop, some fucking Death Grips influence, some Joji influence. I didn't expect this at all. I didn't. And I also didn't know if I wanted it. I heard the 2 singles that came out before the album and I was like, this is really good, but I don't know if I like this. I heard From Me to You last year. It made my top 10 album of the year's list. I could definitely see how some people thought some of the lyrics were corny, some of it was overproduced, but I really liked that and it stuck with me, and it was fun to see his progression from a mediocre YouTube rapper making FIFA videos to then doing impressions of these artists that were really good, and you could tell there was a talent in this kid. And he grew up in front of our eyes. He's 22 or 23 now, I believe. I Didn't Mean to Haunt You has upgrades in every way from his last album, and that was only a year ago. There's some artists that take 5 years in between to drop, and there's barely any progression. And this man took a year to drop. And it's like insane amount of progression. The story that he's crafted with this is so impressive, so beautiful, so heart-wrenching. Just go on to Genius and just read. You don't even have to listen, just read this shit. It's poetic. I'm not gonna nerd out about this album. I'm not gonna spoil much. Go listen to it, please. I urge everybody. I don't care what genre is your favorite. I don't care what perception you have of Quadeca. Go listen to it, come back, shoot me a DM your thought. I would love to talk about this album because I Didn't Mean to Haunt You by Quadeca is surprisingly my favorite album of the year. The sounds on this album have grown on me so much. I've heard nothing like it before. You can tell where he's inspired from, but he's just made it so much better than anything he's inspired from. And I love when artists do that. I love when artists take a sound that is already existing, tweak it so much, and make it so much better. So that is my top albums of 2022. Let me know what y'all think in the comments below. I'm hoping to do more videos like this. I'm hoping to maybe do some collab videos with some friends talking about some music. Go share this with your friends if this is the type of content they like to see. I hope y'all have an amazing day. I'll talk to you later. Peace.